What's up guys, and welcome to the weekly Q&A. One quick little announcement is that next week the Q&A video is going to be on Sunday instead of Saturday because Saturday is going to have the canon update on it, but that's it. On to questions. The first question this week comes from Michael Sweat, who asks if Wedge was a part of Red Squadron at the time of the Battle of Scarif. Yes, he was, but he wasn't actually present at the battle because the filmmakers wanted to preserve the line in A New Hope where he says, "Look at the size of that thing," because that makes it seem like he's never seen the Death Star before. But you can actually hear Wedge's voice over the intercom at Yavin. He's actually the person on the intercom that's redirecting all of the pilots to Scarif. So he says, "Red, blue, and gold squadrons, go to Scarif." I guess he was just on intercom duty at the time, but really it just all came down to preserving that one line from episode 4. Michael Conti wants to know why Darth Maul's lightsaber kept emitting after Obi-Wan cut it in half. You're talking about the episode Twin Suns, but if you remember back to The Phantom Menace, the exact same thing happened. Obi-Wan cut Darth Maul's lightsaber in half and it kept working. That's because double-bladed lightsabers, they're basically just two lightsabers put together. So they each have their own individual crystals and emitters. If you cut one in half, they don't both stop working. You basically just made two lightsabers. Gabriel Moody and Marcus W. both asked about the possibility of an Obi-Wan Kenobi spin-off film, which has been asked before. It's been talked about since the anthology movies were announced to be a thing, and everyone wants it to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen for a while, if it happens at all. It sounds like, based on rumors and talks from Lucasfilm themselves, that they're not done with the character in the saga films, so I think we're likely to see a return of Obi-Wan's Force Ghost in episode 8 or 9. I just don't think they're going to start telling a new Obi-Wan story until they're finished telling the one that they want to tell in the saga films. They're gonna just hold on to Ewan McGregor for those. That's what I'm assuming anyway. But in the meantime, we've got Star Wars Rebels and the Star Wars comics that kind of fill in the gaps. Speaking of a possible Kenobi film, Bear asks if I would prefer to have that or a spinoff about like an X-Wing fighter squadron. I would love to see a Kenobi film, but a fighter squadron film would excite me way more. I've said this before that I don't really want the anthology films to turn into like, okay, now we have a Han Solo movie, now we have an Obi-Wan movie, and a Boba Fett movie, and a Yoda movie. Like, the idea of something like Rogue One excites me way more than the idea of a Han Solo movie. The closer we get to it and the more we hear about it, I'm getting more and more excited about the Han Solo film, but I just think it's a more interesting direction to go if we're exploring new areas of history, or even, in Rogue One's case, familiar ones, but a story we haven't seen with characters we don't know. Something like that excites me more. So yeah, I would love to see a Rogue Squadron film, even if like Wedge is a central character. I assume we would get a bunch of new characters, and I mean, I'm just a sucker for the pilots. I love the X-Wing books, so yeah, I would be all for something like that. Sean Grogan and Matthew Lueck both asked if the novelizations of the films are canon. It depends on the film. Original trilogy and prequel trilogy, technically they're not canon. The Force Awakens and Rogue One, The Last Jedi, anything that comes out from this point forward, they will be canon. So any information that can only be found in a novel adaptation of the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy, that stuff should be taken with a grain of salt. But on the other hand, it's an adaptation of canon source material, so I doubt that anything in there is going to be that far off base. And finally, before I move on from Patreon questions, I had a ton of people on Patreon and on YouTube ask me about Obi-Wan's line regarding Luke being the chosen one. I've already done a full video on this, so I'm gonna just put a card up and a link in the description so you can watch that for my full thoughts if you want, but the gist of it is that I think Obi-Wan is just misinterpreting things, because why would he think that Anakin is still the chosen one? He's just putting all of his hope in Luke now. That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon on our weekly Q&A thread and I left you a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month will get you access to some extra Star Wars Explained goodies, including monthly giveaways and archived live streams, among others, and the combined donations really go a long way in helping support the channel. On to YouTube questions. Alex Cooper asks what the Republic military looked like before the Clone Army. And the answer is they didn't have one. So what would the Clone Wars have looked like if the Clone Army had never been commissioned? Well, for one thing, it probably wouldn't have been called the Clone Wars. But I imagine the Republic to fight the Separatists would have just combined the forces of individual systems, because a lot of different systems did have their own militaries. Joey Angotti wants to know who I think the Force-sensitive villain is going to be in Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. I don't necessarily think we need a Force-sensitive villain. Honestly, I would prefer to just see the Imperial military become more competent, become more threatening to the Rebels, instead of having to rely on Darth Vader or the Inquisitors to do everything. Screen Ninja asks what Star Wars games I would like to see down the line. Right now, I'm most excited for Visceral's Star Wars game because I love the Uncharted series, so I'm really hoping it's going to be something along those lines. A really cool story with really cool characters, like that'll give me a lot to talk about, plus they're just fun to play. I also really hope at some point someone will resurrect Star Wars 1313 because that game looked fantastic. Edith Guerra wants to know why starships can travel hundreds of light years in a matter of days, or hours, or even minutes, when it should take much, much longer. There are reasons I can go into, like the fact that hyperspace is technically a different dimension where things just work differently, or that the Star Wars galaxy is different from our own. But honestly, it's a story thing. Hyperspace travel takes as long as the story needs it to, because we don't want to spend years watching these people go from planet to planet. It's just so we can get from planet to planet very quickly. The science is never really going to make sense at all, so honestly, you just have to kind of forget about it and accept it. Tommy Harrison asks why Darth Maul knows about the prophecy of the Chosen One in the first place. I assume that Palpatine told him about it. Just because they're Sith, that doesn't mean they're going to be ignorant of Jedi beliefs. Honestly, I think it's more likely that the Sith would research the Jedi and their beliefs more than the Jedi would research the Sith beliefs. I think they would think that that's dangerous territory to go into, whereas the Sith would be like, yeah, let's learn all we can about these guys. I also think it's likely that non-Force sensitive people like the Church of the Force, I bet they know about the prophecy as well. I don't think it's like some huge secret that the Jedi just keep to themselves. That's all the time I have for questions today. If you want to ask me something for next week, just put it in the comments below, or sign up on Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. And final reminder that next week the Q&A video is going to be on Sunday and not Saturday. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. As always, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.